Welcome to episode 214 of Silver Lining for Learning. I'm Chris Dede. With me are Lydia Cao from University of Toronto, Punya Mishra from Arizona State University, and our three guests from the National AI Institute for Exceptional Education. Now, we've had three prior episodes on other national AI institutes with an education mission. And there's one more that we haven't had that we will probably do in February. But I find this particular institute, the Exceptional Education Institute, quite interesting because one thing about large language models, whatever you believe they can or can't do, is they are very much about language. And so we would expect some of the biggest gains from generative AI to be in the fact that now on the front end, we can use language in rich evocative ways, and on the back end, we can do learning analytics on language in a richer way than before. So I'm excited to hear about the work of this institute. I'll ask each of our guests in turn to spend a few minutes just talking about themselves and the role that they play in the institute. So, Jinjun.
Hi, good morning, Chris. Yes, okay. My name is Jinjun Sean, and I'm an Empower Innovation Professor with the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at the University at Buffalo. And in relation to this National AI Institute for Exceptional Education, I'm the scientific director for this institute. And so, which means I'm overseeing the overall vision of this institute in terms of the scientific discoveries and the use cases and the deliverables. And so we are working with a very talented group of faculty members and students and our collaborators. And our goal is to advance the science in terms of AI and the learning. And the use cases is to help children with disabilities, in particular children with speech and language processing challenges. So we can talk more about our institute work later. But very nice to join you guys for this conversation.
Sean?
Yes, hi, everyone, and thanks for the invitation to talk about this project. I'm Sean Redmond. I am a professor in communication sciences and disorders. Not everyone knows what that means, so it's the discipline that trains speech-language pathologists and audiologists to work with individuals with communication disorders. My contribution or collaboration on this particular project we're talking about today was I provided the raw data from a project that involved screening for language disorders in 1,000 or so elementary grade students. And so we had recordings available, and Jinjun reached out to see if they could use my recordings to develop an automated scoring procedure that I really don't understand, but I'm happy to contribute.
Dancheng.
Hello, hi everyone. So it's an honor for me to be here to join this podcast. And I'm Dancheng Liu. I'm a PhD student under the supervision of Professor Jinjun and affiliated with the National AI Institute for Exceptional Education, where I'm responsible for multiple projects in the AI Institute. So under my team, so we did quite a few projects that includes build a tool to get more clean data for our models, deep learning models, and we build better automatic speech recognition models for this special group of children that in potentially speech disorders. And also finally, this project that we probably will talk about today, at Auto RSR, where we use AI technologies to automate evidence-based screening for the children with potential speech disorders. And yeah, our work supports both the AI side of the researchers and also the speech language pathologists and researchers with speech languages. Yeah.
So I don't want to pretend that I have any expertise in this area, but I did work for 5 years in a funded project by the Chan Zuckerberg Institute at Harvard called Reach Every Reader. And one of the 5 strands of the project was developing a screener. So I learned a little, maybe by osmosis, about screeners. And the impression that I have is twofold. One of them is that they're very much needed because there's many more children who need help than there are human beings to provide that help. And second, that this is not a simple diagnosis. It's a complicated diagnosis. There's lots of ways in which communication can go awry. And so a combination of the human and the screener are really needed to try to sort things out child by child. So I'll begin just by asking if that naive conception of the challenge that you're taking on is accurate, and if not, please make it more sophisticated.
No, actually, Chris, what you said is spot on, right? And that's exactly kind of one of the major challenges we like to tackle, right? Is about the screening. And as you probably through your project, you already mentioned, yes, indeed, right? The screening is very important to identify the issues early, so you can help those children in need early, right? Because the early intervention is the best intervention. And the one you mentioned is about the reading, and I don't know which grade you're talking about. I know in the U.S., right, for some of the school district, it's probably like I was thinking probably more resourceful school district, right? When the kid first goes through the kindergarten, they will do some kind of very short of, I think, 30 minutes kind of the screening, right? Probably that's one of the things you would do, just that's including the reading and the spelling and understanding. It's very quick, right, for the school to say, hey, this kid maybe needed some additional support or not. And that's all we have. And for some of the school district with less resources, probably we don't even have this basic screening because of, as you said, we do not have enough human beings to help them, right? And so that's kind of like a similar to what our institute try to help. And of course, we like to extend it into a little bit more, beyond the one you just said, on the reading only, right? It's also about the speech, and also we want to extend the early ages, like the 3 to 5. And the reason for us to identify this particular group, as I mentioned earlier, is about early screening. And in the U.S., actually, we know we do not have enough speech and language pathologists, and it's so-called universal screening. Actually, it's not possible, right? So when in the early ages, when young kids, they pretty much rely on parents or relatives, right? Or sometimes maybe the daycare teachers to pick up some of the early signs, and then to maybe potentially refer those signs to parents to say, hey, maybe you should bring the kids to see some doctors. But a lot of times the early signs will not be picked up. So that's why a lot of the kids will just miss the sign. And later on, when they grown up, right, they miss the best intervention period. So that's kind of the reason we want to use technology to help. Can we develop some AI augmented technologies, right? And to help parents or help the daycare teachers, sometimes school teachers, to pick up those early signs and provide some of the evidence, to show to the parents. So instead of like to self-denial or think, the child can outgrow those issues, right? To show, hey, this is the evidence. It's not only one-time occurrence, right? Actually, it has been maybe a repeated occurrence, with this particular kind of the evidence from the videos or from the audios. And hopefully this will be more convincing, right? So convincing the parents, hey, I should do something to bring my kids to see doctors early. So that's kind of one aspect of our institute work. It's about the screening. There's another aspect is also about the intervention, which I don't know if your project kind of touched upon or not, right? So after the screening, there's maybe even the current approach, because as you mentioned, the screening can be many type of screenings, right? And that's, I mean, our school district right now, we have a lot of kids already have the individualized educational program. They need to be helped in the school system. But then again, we do not have enough of the resources, which means we do not have enough special education teachers, or we do not even have enough speech language pathologists to help them. And again, so that's another bigger project. Hey, can we use AI to help in terms of intervention? But I think our institute is broader, right, and has both screening and intervention. And of course, today probably our conversation will mostly focus on the screening side. But I just want to make people know, this our institute, in terms of research scope, is much broader than screening.
Well, and I think we've seen in medicine that if you have screenings, but not interventions that are linked to them, people feel that things are worse, not better, because they have these diagnoses that are scary to them. And then they say, well, what do I do? And the answer is, I don't know. Well, that is the wrong answer. So I'm happy to hear that your institute is focusing on both the screening and the intervention, because that's where the benefit really is going to be. Punya, did you have a
Yeah, I just
question
had
or
a
comment?
Sure. It's more of a question just to set the context for our listeners and honestly, selfishly for myself as well. So maybe Sean, this could be something you could sort of talk a little bit about. So when you say speech and language pathologies, what are the range of things are we looking at? Because I'm sure there is an extremely wide range of what these things could be, and then how you sort of decided which ones you would want to focus on. And then maybe, Jinjun and Cheng, you can talk about sort of how now you took that data and then converted into something that you could start seeing patterns and, and make at least some preliminary predictions on. But I think I'm honestly I don't know anything much about this at all. So some context, Sean, I think would be very helpful to understand what are these things that we are talking about and what you have decided to focus on.
Okay. So if we're talking about communication disorders as a large category, so all of the things that a child in the public school system could receive services for that fall into the category of speech or language impairment. We would be talking collectively about 10 to 12% of the student population has some kind of communication disorder. These include some of the more visible or accessible ones, like for children who have problems producing their speech sounds correctly. That's the most sort of traditional set of signs that would bring someone into the attention of a speech language pathologist. But in addition to just having difficulties producing speech sounds, we also know there's a lot of kids who have problems with vocabulary and grammar. And out of that 10 to 12% that I just mentioned, about 7% of those kids fit that profile that I'm describing, with primarily a problem with vocabulary or grammar. Unlike the kids with speech sound disorders or kids who have stuttering, which are some other conditions, kids with language impairments often get overlooked. So my research is focused on differential diagnosis. And what I've been interested in for a while is the extent to which we can differentially diagnose a language disorder from something that could look similar from the teacher's perspective in terms of how a child is acting in the classroom. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder will involve, at the teacher's level, a child who's having difficulty following directions, a child who seems to be distracted during lessons, and maybe someone who has a hard time interacting successfully with their peers. All of those behavioral signs that I just described would also apply to a child with a language impairment. if you don't understand the instructions a teacher is providing to you, there's really not much else for you to do in the classroom except look for something else to do, right? So you're going to look distracted. Another thing that we know about language impairments is sometimes the context will have redundant information that the child can use to help them figure out what's going on, so that they don't have to rely exclusively on their language skills. These children might look around to see what their peers are doing before they start an assignment. And from the teacher's perspective, this looks like the child sometimes understands what's going on and sometimes doesn't. And it's easy for teachers who aren't aware of the fact that language impairments are probably in their classroom to attribute this to motivation or attention, or maybe even suggest that the child's got some social emotional problem. And the analogy that sort of works well to think about it is if you are learning a second language and you're in a classroom and you can't follow everything that's being presented to you, imagine that's happening with your first language. And you can kind of see what the signs in the classroom might look like from the teacher's perspective. So some of the measures that work really well with this differential diagnosis include things that are relatively quick to administer, like take a handful of minutes, so we don't run into the problem of kids getting bored or distracted or checked out before we complete the assessment. And things like, we know that kids with language impairments have hard time holding things in memory. So if you give them a task where they repeat a nonsense word or repeat a sentence, they do demonstrably poorer than kids who don't have a language impairment. So we have high sensitivity and high specificity for these kinds of measures, both when we're differentiating a child who's developing atypically from a child who's developing typically, but also within this differential diagnosis space. So determining whether we're dealing with a language impairment or a behavioral difficulty like ADHD has been worked out in our research.
Sean, thank you so much. First of all, I think the statistic that you threw in the beginning, mentioned in the beginning, like the 10% or so, I mean, just speaks to the scale of it. But I think what you also sort of really highlighted, which was my suspicion, is that it's a really complicated array of features which can both lead and mislead, right? In terms of the diagnosis that we do. And that makes that so critical, because you could be trying to fix something that is not the problem in some way, like your intervention might be completely missing the point. So thank you for that. So then it, I think, comes to the other two guests, about now, how do you take something that is that messy and complicated, having to do, and particularly, I think, the fact that they can't express themselves is part of the problem that you're trying to sort of make sense of. I wonder how you then take computational large language models or whatever techniques, machine learning techniques, to try to sort of grapple or grasp with that complexity in any kind of a sensible way. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Punya, thank you. Yeah, so let me kind of show, kind of reiterate a little bit of this complexity, right? So Sean just mentioned to you about there's a lot of you can think of signs or signals, right? You need to pick up, right? And I think Chris actually earlier mentioned about the method. Let's focus on the screening. There's a different researchers. They can come with different ways of picking up different signals, right? And come with their own ways of to do this screening diagnosis. And but out of those many possible screening methods or the practices, we want to focus on one types. Okay, it's called one type called evidence-based practices, right? And this Sean probably can explain this better. So I think it's an evidence-based practice means, okay, you have to, based on the scientific kind of experiment, data analysis, right? Like Sean mentioned, like a differential diagnosis, right? And to really kind of convince yourself that whatever the signals you picked up, right, is scientifically sound, right? And with the data to back it up. And that's actually, that's why when we started this project, and Sean actually is not a part of our institute initially, like as the core team, right, technical team, but he's a very important collaborator, partner for us, because we find out through our scientific team members say, hey, you should talk to Sean, because Sean developed a screening method called Sean Redmond sentence recall, right? We call RSR. And that is an evidence-based screening method. And it's relatively, probably it's okay, very easy to describe. Right? And Sean, probably you can describe this better than I can come, maybe Sean has this ISR screening method, right? And so this is one evidence-based screening. So we have to understand, right, from Sean, hey, how you do this screening, right? What kind of the process you're using? And that's once we understood his way of doing things, a human, you can think of the human, right? In the loop right now, okay, how human do that this intervention, what are signals, the human is trying to pick up, and how human calculated whatever the metric. And then we say, okay, let's use AI to do the same thing as human do, but just kind of automate it, right? And make it faster, or make it even a little bit more kind of consistent, because a human has different ways of doing things. Maybe different people, right, even out of the same training, may carry out the procedure slightly differently. But AI or computing, right, is very consistent. And then we can show you, hey, let's compare what AI can do, right, against the humans. So we can do first level of validation, because we want to make sure whatever technology we develop, right, even though we know technology is not perfect, that's something we need to validate to gain the trust from the practitioners. So now they can start to accept the AI or our technology, and then we can do more, right? That's kind of, we take this more of a gradual approach, so work with a practitioner to show the evidence-based practice can be automated, and then we can do something more, right? So that's kind of our approach, but I think maybe it's good for Sean, right, to explaining his RSR first. And then we can ask Dancheng, because he tried to automate this one. Then we can maybe this will make the story a little bit complete. So Sean, maybe you can explain how you come with your sentence recall screening method.
Sure. So, part of pursuing evidence-based metrics is that you don't go too wild with innovation, and you stick to things that have been pretty well vetted over multiple decades. So, as a field, we have been using a task where kids are asked, and adults are asked, to listen to a sentence and then repeat it back verbatim. So it's not a complicated task in terms of what the individual is asked to do. They usually figure it out. If you ask kids to repeat questions, they'll answer questions. But besides that little hiccup, it's pretty easy to have high levels of consistency and reliability across people, because it's not a very demanding task for the practitioner. But what this particular procedure has shown over the years is that it's really good at segregating kids who have language impairments from kids who don't have language impairments. So what I did with my particular set of stimuli was I identified two kinds of sentences that are known to be challenging for kids with language impairments. One type of sentence that's in our protocol is the passive sentence. So this is where the noun phrase that's in the subject position is not doing the action, it's receiving the action. So the ball was kicked. by the boy is a passive sentence. The boy kicked the ball is an active sentence. And that's has been reported to be ongoing challenge for kids with language impairments. And another place where we went with the sentence protocol was on producing active sentences that are marked for past tense. So we've known for a while, since the late 80s, that children with language impairments who are learning English and are monolingual and are using the general American English accent have a noted difficulty with correctly producing the past tense on verbs. What they're inclined to do is just omit the past tense ed on a verb. So that was the logic behind the construction of the sentences. We made them long enough so that kids who are developing without a language impairment are challenged. So we don't have, one of the problems you can run into is if you make a task too easy, then you don't have enough variation in the performance of kids who are unaffected. So you want to manipulate those kinds of variables. Some things we didn't manipulate or set up to be challenging for kids is we kept the vocabulary very simple. Because for my research, we were primarily interested in grammatical processing, not so much vocabulary processing. The particular protocol that I developed has been used by a number of research groups who've been able to replicate our results. So we've had independent replications, which isn't always part of the process when people are developing screening instruments. And I guess I'll step off the podium for a bit and let other people contribute.
Sure, thank you, Sean. So kind of to summarize what Sean says, Sean's sentence recall screening has 16 sentences, right? And Sean kind of carefully designed, and the child needs to basically, after listening to each sentence, and they need to repeat that sentence, right? And as a screener, and just need to listen in how the child, how correctly the child can recall that sentence. And there's also, of course, are you missing the verb, or are you a repetition, or you transpose, right, etc., etc. So the Sean has this way of do the scoring, basically what kind of mistakes you made, right, and how many for each sentence, and then you assign a kind of a score, right, 1 point, 2 point, 3 points. After 16 sentences, you need to tally all the numbers. You get a final score, and then you compare against the typical children's kind of the capabilities, right? And then you decide, oh, this maybe is a potential issue. So that's kind of the gist of this screening. So now I will let the Dancheng to explain, right, how we use technology to automate these ones. So Dancheng, maybe you can explain, what the lessons you have learned to automate this one.
Yes, thank you, Professor. So to use AI to automate this process, so what we designed the auto RSR system is to essentially follow what the humans would do. So as Professor Redmond and Professor Ziong has introduced, we have RSR, Redmond sentence recall, with 16 sentences. And then the screener essentially is to listen to the children's speech. And there's a sheet for the RSR, basically has 16 sentences, and you have to mark on the sheet on each sentence whether there's children made which kind of mistakes and how many of them. So on the AI side, how do we do this step by step? So first of all, the children's speech, right, is comes in with audio format. So what we need in the first step is that we need to let the AI listen to the speech and make it understandable. So the first step is to transcribe all children's audio to its text format, so that AI, for the later steps, can understand what the child is speaking. So this step is what we call automatic speech recognition, which essentially is just the transcription. Okay, so you transcribe the children's audio to the text format. And the second step, after we get the text format of the children's audio, what we do is that we have to basically find the corresponding the sentence the child is repeating compared with the original one of the 16 sentences. So for each one of the 16 sentences, right, we need to find in the transcription where the child is saying this and like basically where he starts and where he ends, and basically crop that text out to be compared with the one of the 16 sentences that Zhong provided basically through an algorithm later. So this step is called segmentation, where we segment the audio and its transcription out to like basically align with the one of the 16 sentences. And after the segmentation step, we have a match between each of the 16 sentences and also the AI transcription. And from this step, then we basically will do what the SLPs will actually do on the sheet. We will mark the mistakes and calculate the mistakes. Okay, so how do we do that? The Redmond sentence recall protocol defines I think 3 types of errors. You have the omission, where the child skips a word of the original sentence, and a substitution, where the child essentially just says a wrong word instead of the correct word. Say if the original sentence was the boy, and then the child somehow says the girl, that will be substitution. And lastly, there will be the transposition, where the child swaps the order of 2 words. With these 3 types of errors will be marked, and we'll use algorithm to simulate human behavior, where we mark the omissions, we mark the transpositions, and we mark the substitutions. And after that, essentially what we have is that we have a marked sheet similar to human with the errors and the number of errors. And we basically use the same metric as human SLPs when they are screening to count the errors and give a score of each to each of the sentence, and summing up the score. And finally, you get the number that is assigned for each particular children on this RSR test. And this number then will be compared with typical range children's average score and the standard deviations, and decide whether the child is significantly less compared to typical developing children range. And then that will be used to define whether the child fails or passes RSR screening or not.
So actually, I want to add, okay, this sounds like quite a trivial, right? But you may seem like, but let me kind of emphasize a few kind of challenges, right? First, remember, this is not adults, right? Kind of the languages. It's the children's speech, and also potential children with speech language disorders, right? And they talk too. So actually, that's the first step we tried is okay, ASR, you think maybe it's very mature, right? Even you use Alexa, and Siri all the time, it seems like it's okay. But the moment you apply those technology to children's speech, immediately you will realize a lot of the transcription actually cannot be accurate. That's the first one, right? Second, also you look at this is it's not like every children has can go to the clinic, right? Sit in a quiet room to carry out this test. This can go to the schools, can be the community centers, right? And sometimes it's not only one-to-one, can be multiple children doing this screen test simultaneously, right? So there's a lot of background noise, right? And it's a very noisy environment. And how do you do the transcription under those noisy environment? That's another challenge. Yet another challenge, right? A lot of the ASR that were designed, right, is about try to understand what you try to say, right? It's not how you say it, it's what you said. That's the target. But for our screening, it's not so much of what you said. Of course, we care about that as well, but we really more care about how you say it, right? Just give an example. For example, when you say, maybe give an example, right? Sometimes because in your speech, you have some, you see, you have a lot of this pause, right? And a lot of filler words. And for the transcript, sometimes, in order to understand you, I can remove those filler words. Or maybe sometimes you have some repetitions. You say, all of the pictures were colored by his little sister. This is one of the sentences, right? And you can see I already repeated a few phrases. For ASR, some of the ASR tools will automatically remove those repeated, the so-called sentences or word, because they know this is not relevant for understanding. But for, as you can see, like Sean designed his sentence recall. That's very important, right? And how accurate you are able to produce the sentences, the repetition and how many repetitions, where the repetitions need to be picked out. That's what I mean. Our first step when Dancheng carry out this task, right? I asked Dancheng, let's try to take all the existing available, right, ASR tools out there in the market. Let's do a kind of using the data from Sean. Okay, let's do a transcription. Take a look as is. Can we use the transcription to do the scoring? It's horrible. And that's something we have to come with a new technique, right? Like the ways of based on existing ASR tool as is. Yet we have to do something more in order for us to get the information we need in order to be able to do the scoring as humans doing. Because when humans listen, we are not like ASR, right? We listen to all the signals we like to pick out. So that's, I mean, I just want to illustrate a few of the challenges, okay? And it's not as trivial as like Dancheng kind of described, okay? So maybe Dancheng, you can also talk about, after we did this kind of scoring, right? Because Sean gave us about 1,000 of those recordings. And for each one of them, right? And Sean has already have the human scored data. Now we use AI to do the scoring. And our AI is like the way we developed. Maybe, and then we compare our results against the humans. So maybe Dancheng, you can mention, what are the data results we got?
Okay, so yeah, thanks, Professor, for the introduction. Yes, and so we in total have 1,059 samples obtained from Professor Redmond, and 947 out of them have, I think, age information, which is required by the Redmond census score because different ages of groups of children have different scores, like cutoffs. Okay, and so out of the 947, we did two comparisons. Actually, out of the 947, we did just comparison with human SLP scorings. So what we found that the automated version has between 80 to 90% agreement with the human scorers on whether we should pass or fail a child, and like to be more specific on the range of the comparisons. So what we observed is that the AI models, they tend to be much harsher on the children by giving them lower scores compared to humans. And this is, we analyze it, I think we think it's because of two reasons. So first of all, the AI model, as Professor was mentioning, it was still not perfect. It sometimes does horrible on the children's speech, especially when the child is having problems, difficulties in speaking, and also when the background noise is high, very large. And also at the same time, we found that the SLPs sometimes when they are doing the scoring, because they know the content, they know the 16 sentences that the child is supposed to repeat. Sometimes they have a tendency to give them a little bit more leniency towards some ambiguous words when the child is not speaking that clearly, right? Sometimes the SLP think, okay, that's close enough. This is close enough. And then just like, okay, no, you pass. But AI is on the other hand, right? AI is like, it doesn't know what the child is supposed to say. It just takes the best guess. And this sometimes will, yeah. Right.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is what human brains are designed to do.
Yeah.
When we're interacting with people and they make an occasional mistake or slip up, it doesn't always register to us consciously because we will fill in, our brains will fill in what the expected response was supposed to be. And so you're right, there's a level of objectivity that you can get with an AI that you will never really be able to get with a human because our brains are designed to clean up mess.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I want to just shift the conversation. I know Lydia has been waiting with a question. I have so many follow-ups, but I will pause on those. But Lydia, go ahead, please, with your question or comment.
I really appreciate the discussion so far and that you allow us to look under the hood of this algorithm. The idea seemed to be straightforward, like we're going to use AI to do this, but there's just so much nuances, especially come to speech impairment. And also in my research, we're looking at using AI to give student feedback on their knowledge building discourse. Again, seem to be a kind of straightforward idea, but when we are looking at the accuracy of AI's rating and human rating, as well as the type of feedback that AI give, that's way more complicated and require a lot of refinement. So I really appreciate that you give us this like deeper examination of what you're doing. I guess I will zoom out a little bit to think about like this real world applications and what they might look like. So for example, like what are the real world use cases of this AI-powered screening tool by speech and language pathologist, as well as by teacher in the classroom? How might that look like? And also, I know we're going to focus like on the screening tool, but I just want to kind of get an idea, the possibility of the type of AI-powered intervention that might be designed in the future.
Sure. So Lydia, so let me take your questions first, right? So the first one, like the impact-wise, how we're going to use this auto RSR. And so I have to say, right, because in terms of screening, there's many screening methods. The one we are automating right now is one of them, right, which is working with Sean. That's what we call auto RSR. And right now, the auto RSR, as Sean mentioned, it has already been adopted by a few of researcher groups, and actually in the school district in Utah, right? And Sean, last time we met, he mentioned to me, and some of the school districts using his method to do the screening. So I think the first step for us to deploy this one will be working with some of the school districts who adopted Sean's method, right, for screening, and then we can work with them to automate, right? And hopefully this will help them to do this more cost effectively, right, and more effectively, and also probably can scale it to more populations. That's how we see this impact. But I also have to say, because there's other method as well, because maybe not all the school districts buying into Sean's RSR method. They maybe have others. Actually, in fact, if you go to the market, you will see, right, there's many different screenings method as well. So that's why in our AI Institute, we are working with other partners, thanks that Sean already introduced us to a few and his collaborators, they also develop different type of screening method. We are also working with them, right, to try to automate their screening method, because maybe the other schools may adopt their method. So we are also working along those lines as well. And even actually in our research center, in our institute, right, we also have a Professor Pam Hadley from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and herself and her team is trying to develop a new method called the automaticity-based method. And because she wants to develop a method that is kind of a language agnostic, right? Because in the US, we have a lot of children, English is not their primary language. And a lot of parents say, hey, you said like my kids have a problem actually because my child does not speak English at home because they have other languages, that's not accurate. So that's exactly the kind of new screening method, right? And Professor Padley, in our team wants to solve. And the way she defined the screening is based on automaticity, or you can think of the fluency, right? For example, when child to read a story, for example, how often the child pauses, and how often the child revises the speech, and how often the child kind of maybe just said something wrong and has some filler words, right? So all of this, and how long is your pause? All of this information need to be calculated. As you can see, this is very difficult for humans to do it accurately. That's how our tools, now we are working on this kind of tools. So can we use AI to compute those pause, filler words, and repetitions, etc., right, more accurately? So we can develop a better automaticity-based metrics, and then we can do the experiment. And hopefully this will be more effective screening method, right? That is kind of not language dependent, which seems like to be a better screening. So to kind of quickly summarize this part of the screening, right? We have many other screening methods we are still working on, right? And that's why we will also welcome people to reach out to us. If you have something you think like your school district probably is more particularly interested in, I would like to see how AI can help. So now let me quickly switch to your second part of your question, right, about the intervention. Actually, yes, our institute also have the intervention aspect. So maybe let's give you two examples, kind of high level, right? One of the intervention, for example, if like as Sean mentioned, the children with the speech sound disorders, right? And in order for you, you need help the child to practice the sound. And one of the exercise typically the SLP do is the practice the word, has the sound in it, right? And also find another word which has a similar pronunciation. The only difference is the sound, which is different. Let's say R and L, right? And but you need to find the word pairs that has the right sound contrast properties. And then so you can play the word games with the kid to practice the sound. So this is well defined, right? It's a scientifically proven method. The trouble is SLPs need to take a lot of preparation time because they need to know what sound this child have difficulty with and what kind of word pairs should I create to prepare the practice. And do I have the instrument, for example, like a flashcard in my kind of the collection, so I can find those flashcards, so I can play those interventions. This is all preparation time. It's something SLPs they do not want to spend, right? Because they rather to spend the time to really help the child, not to spend so much time to prepare the materials. So this is where AI can come in to help. So we develop a kind of a prototype. So we say, can we use AI to provide its interface for the SLPs? You just tell me, hey, you have a child, right? What kind of the sound disorders you have? Let us AI to automatically find the right pair of word, has the right sound contrast, and also use AI, generative AI, to generate the right flashcard for you to use. And also you can put a lot of constraints. Maybe this child is only interested in the sport, or not only interested in sport, but also interested in the baseball. Maybe you should only find the word related to the baseball so the child can be more engaging, right? As you can see, this AI can do very well. So then we can automate the whole process, right? Make the interface very easy to use and to save the time for SLPs. This is one example that we are working on. Another quick example, is also the, let's say the post-session time. Because SLPs, when they carry out the intervention, at the end of it, they need to document, right? What has been done and what should I do next? And they have a very kind of legal document called the SOAP note, right? Subjective, objective assessment and the plan called the SOAP, S-O-A-P. This SOAP note also takes time too, because the SLPs during the session, they need to kind of remember all the signals, all the things they did. After they need to write this report. That takes a lot of time. So we also try to develop a tool we call the automate kind of it's a SOAP note or SOAP AI. And using the SOAP AI tools, we can design what its interface should look like. What kind of signals typical SLPs try to capture during this intervention? What kind of information they want to write into the SOAP notes, right? And can we use AI to understand this whole interactions? In fact, Sean mentioned, right, in the classrooms, the child's attention, right? And the follow instructions, the interactions. Can we use AI to understand this multimodality information and calculate those proper metrics and then generate the report automatically? So these are the two, we can save the SLP's time so they can use their time more effectively to help more children. So these are the two just kind of sample examples, interventions we are doing. And there's many others.
That's really amazing. You kind of answered my follow-up question already. I guess my follow-up question is I think what you're doing right now is like really making the access to screening more accessible to people who don't have such access, and also making the work of a practitioner more effective, such as generating these cards automatically for practitioner use. So what do you think is the uniquely human in this kind of AI-human partnership here? So coming from a teacher perspective, what is the role that I'm going to play that is not going to be replaced by AI, but AI is really going to augment my work here?
Okay, so I maybe let Sean to explain this a little bit better, because my answer will be a little biased, right, from the technology. So Sean, what do you think? If we provide this auto ISR tools to you right, and your collaborators, what do you think we will replace humans?
So let's see. So the things that were laid out by Jinjun that an AI could do for us sort of boils down to the kinds of activities a speech pathologist spend a lot of time, but it's not a lot of cognitive effort. So it's from our perspective, it's the busy work that's involved with clinical practice. What probably won't be replaceable with an AI is the set of skills that speech pathologists develop that allows them to identify what kind of feedback a student needs, so that it takes them closer to providing correct productions. So, providing, if a child has a difficulty in marking past tense, sometimes helping them mark present tense and contrasting that with past tense helps them pull that together. The sort of professional awareness of how language works is probably what keeps the human and the human AI interaction set up. And the other thing that has to be in part of this is that the AIs are going to create junk sometimes. And if you can't detect the signal from the noise that's coming out of these things, then you're going to be providing the wrong kind of cues to the students. So monitoring what the AI is doing and strategically deciding how it's going to help your work is probably requires a human brain to do that still.
Right. That's something our institute, we take an approach called the human-centered AI design approach, right? We have quite a few faculty members who are the HCI kind of experts, like Professor Julia Hintz from the University of Washington, right? And Professor Yun Huang from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, right? And also we have Professor from the Stanford and the University of Nevada, Reno. They're working with us, right? To help us to design what are the right interface, what are the part human can do better, what are the part AI can do better, right? So in order for us to design this tool, the two examples I gave it to I gave it to you, right? The speech sound disorder, there's a flashcard and the word kind of selections, and also this automating the super notes generation. So these are some of the tasks. I was like, a lot of SLPs they don't want to do, right? They spend too much time. They'd rather for AI to help someone to do this like a dirty work, or the work that not so pleasant, right? I think that is why the AI can augment humans' capabilities, right? So they can focus on something more intelligent. And as you can see, even though we are trying to automate a lot of things, we always rely on humans' guidance, right? And try to make sure whatever we are doing and is explainable to human and also is acceptable, right? And a lot of this we cannot just automatically generate something. I think is good. It's evidence-based, had to be coming from the human.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Is what you're saying is that the humans need to have the oversight of AI's work, which requires like upscaling human skills in a way that they can't, they used to carry out some of these like repetitive tasks, but now they need another level of skill to be able to kind of have the oversight of what is going on. So that's really interesting.
Oh, I like what you said. Exactly. Yes. Of course, once we have the more of the deployment of this kind of solutions, yes, the human will become even more intelligent because they need to oversee what AI is doing, right? And also probably AI need to do better, And so this is a good thing, So and help for both the human and the AI to continue to move to advance and move ahead.
So I'm going to take us in a slightly different direction here. This is a question that I've asked every AI center that's come. But before that, just want to piggyback on something that you guys were just discussing. I just recently wrote a blog post about this study that was done with like around 1,000 scientists working in this material science company. And what they found is they had a special AI model which sort of was trained on material science, and in order to develop new ideas for materials and so on. So overall, the company productivity in terms of patents and new materials went up. But when they went and looked closer, what they find is that it's a certain group of scientists whose productivity completely blew up and others sort of stayed the same. And it had to do with expertise and judgment. So the ones who had a sense of judgment, who could judge the outputs of the AI, were actually their productivity zoomed up significantly. While and you know, so I came at it from an education point of view. So in my blog post, where I was like, you are going to have differences in students coming into your classroom, and that AI in some way, if the learners are there, a learner who has a slightly more background knowledge or a slightly more is actually going to learn faster using this technology because they will have some internal judgment already built in. And so this might actually increase the gaps in student achievement, if, you know, because of this. But there's the flip side to it, which is the positive side, which is that in terms of the expertise we need to bring to the task, we now need to bring more of a judgment than just basic knowledge of facts or something that way, right? So that was just an aside. But the one question that I've asked every, you know, this is our fourth, I think, AI center, is so here you are, you know, you're doing your work, you are building these models, and clearly one thing that came out starkly in whatever you described is just how complex this process is. This is trying to understand these kinds of errors that children make, and then you have to build these models, and these models hallucinate or make stuff up, and then you go back and tweak, and then you got to go test it out and compare, and it's a lot of work. And it's nitty-gritty, detailed, specific work. And now suddenly you live in a world where, as of like November of 2023, once ChatGPT is released in the world, you have this incredible hype. Like, oh, AI can do everything. It can cook for you. It can, you know, compose songs. It can, you know, judge student essays. And suddenly, I mean, so here you are facing this really interesting tension, you know, which is, A, it's great that your field is getting the attention. That's wonderful. Like, we all love it. I'm sure, you know, I've always joked that all our episodes which have AI in the title now get more viewership just because it has AI in the title, right? Because that's the flavor of the week. But as people working on the ground in this, in some way, that hype is actually harmful to you. Because when you go in and start giving these nuanced details, like, we can't just jump in and throw this technology out there because it has the potential to misdiagnose, to actually cause harm in ways. I wonder how, you know, you are dealing with that tension, because I think it's a genuine tension. I see that in my work, you know, where when I go talk to a school leader and I'm like, you know, you might want to think about the biases that this system is producing. You might want to think about X or Y, while they are getting from everybody from Salman Khan to whoever, and product, you know, companies out there which are pitching their products as if they are the solution to every educational issue out there. And so I wonder how you guys are dealing with that tension, because to me, that's a genuine tension. That is, you know, there is a positive and there is a huge problem in terms of people's perception of what this technology can do. I don't know, whoever wants to jump in.
Sure. I think this. Let me take a crack first. Okay. Um, Indeed, this is like a lot of attention, right? And also sometimes I would say miss judgment as well. And so I think that's why education is very important. You use the word of the people working on the ground, right? And I always say rubber meets the road, right? And that is really, you can see the technology, what it can really can do. Yes, you will try the GPT, maybe you just do the chatting, right? Which it doesn't matter, you know, so how good or how wrong it is, it's okay, you know. But you start to use the chat the GPT for a specific use case. In our case, for example, try to generate the right pictures even, right? Or the try to write the super notes. And it's not sometimes the mistake, the errors cannot be easily tolerated, right? And that is one of the things, you know, there's some of technology we can easily to see the gap. And so, for example, let me give you an example, right? I always show you, for example, we already given an example about the transcription, automatic speech transcription. You can see, right? Once you put into the real case of the children's speech, there's a lot of mistakes, right? We have to adjust. And about the like the picture generation, right? People say, hey, like you heard of so many models, you know, and generative AI, you can easily generate the pictures, whatever. You just say, hey, generate me a picture of a dog. You can get tons of picture of dogs, right? Very very good ones. But let's give an example here. As I mentioned, if we try to generate a flashcard to help children with speech sound disorder, when I say generate a picture of a dog, right? It's not about any dog. If you can, hey, put a nice dog, okay, in front of the background is the beach, right, with the sunset, beautiful dog. But that is for the pedagogical point of view, especially for children with like autistic children, right? This picture may be very distracting because you showed the beach, you showed the ocean, you showed the sunset, you said, okay, this dog. Which one? I talk about the sunset, is the dog, or is the real dog, right? So that means you sometimes you want to generate some pictures with specific constraints, or right. So this is something which is not technology can be just out of the box, can solve this, can provide you the right answers. But you still have to trigger the technology, continue to develop technology, so make it to be really usable. So I hope to kind of show you, right? This is even though there's a lot of the hype around it, once the rubber meets the road, you will see the real challenges, right? So I always say, hey, don't worry about the AI. Let the AI to develop, right? Let the AI to solve your real challenges first, right? Of course, there's always the bias issues, right? And the explainer issues we need to address. But you should still let the technology to develop and to solve your challenges. That's kind of my take on it. I don't know. Okay, Dancheng, you worked on this. Okay, you are really the ground people working on the ground. So what do you think, Dancheng?
So yeah, basically what we found is that while there is a big hype of GPT can do a lot of stuff, in fact, what we show is that theoretically, yes, GPT can do a lot of stuff, but practically speaking, yes, there's still a big gap between AI and human. That we still need. That's why we using the human-centered AI design for our institute, because humans still need to be there at least for the reasonable future to guide and judge what AI has produced. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, as always, we run out of time. These conversations go very quickly, and there's always lots of interesting questions left at the end. But all of us want to thank all of you for taking the time to describe the really interesting things that your institute is doing. And of course, beyond the specifics of speech language pathology, the concept that more and more of the routine parts of diagnosis across the board for every form of diagnosis may be done by AI. And it's institutes like yours that are going to help us pioneer what that looks like. That really is very exciting. So we are going to meet next week. There won't be an episode. We're taking a holiday for Thanksgiving. Jinjun, did you have a concluding remark that you want to make?
Thank you. Yeah, Chris. Yeah, one thing I think I really want to emphasize, right? As you can see, even here, right, it's a very, very interdisciplinary team, and Sean working in the communicative disorders department. It's not typically working with computer science engineering. And in order for any of this interdisciplinary collaboration to work, especially like our National AI Institute, this kind of a scale, we have researchers from a lot of different disciplines coming together, right? And to collaborate, which is not easy, right? Because everyone speaks different languages, everyone brings different background, and how to collaborate effectively and how to communicate effectively. And it's a science of team working, right? Is critically important. That's mean our AI Institute, we have researchers, right now led by Professor Carol Mira from the Penn State University, helping us to understand, how we can collaboratively work as an effective team. And this team science is also very important for any of this larger scale interdisciplinary collaboration. And I'm happy, we are able to work with Sean, right? And Sean is able to contribute his data set for our work. And I would say probably not all the collaboration can be as smooth as the one we have here, but we still also have challenges too. So I just want to make sure that people realize, interdisciplinary collaboration is easier said than done.
And I think what you're saying is true of all the National AI Institutes. And it's part of NSF's wisdom in the funding that they are giving people 5 years, because this is not something that turns on a dime. This is not something that can be done really quickly. It requires a lot of time and effort to develop these kinds of collaborations.
Yeah. Sorry, Chris. Go ahead, finish your thought. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
I was going to close. So
No,
You
I just want
want
to say, I want to just mention something that I put in the chat because I think it should be there on the record, because so much of the conversation around AI today is at such a superficial level. And so having all of you talk about sort of the nuance and the detail and how much work goes into getting these things right, and the consequences for real people, right? Sean, I mean, this is your life's work. I just want to just thank you for that, because I don't think we see enough of that. Because the hype has sort of taken over the world. And that's a problem, because then we start throwing these solutions which are not ready at genuine children and real people and real problems. So I really, really appreciate that today. So thank you very much for that.
Yes.
Well, thank you for having this opportunity, and to talk about those issues.
So 2 weeks, we will have episode 215, which will be about Goodwill, North Georgia. This is a group that I work with as part of the workforce upskilling and reskilling that I do in my research. And they're wonderful at taking people who may not have succeeded academically, but who want to upskill to jobs that are more complex and that pay a living wage, and helping them to accomplish this. So we'll look at that kind of workplace-based learning in a couple weeks. And thanks again to all of you for a great episode today.